Okay, I think we're live. So today I just want to talk a little bit about the new documentary, quote unquote, that's taken the media by storm. It's called AKA Jane Roe, and you've probably heard about this. It's basically a film production company, and a director went to Norma McCorvey, who was the hi Inky, who was the lead petitioner in the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade case. Hi, JV. And they came to her as she was on her deathbed. She was dying, basically, and constructed this film where she renounces the pro-life movement and claims that she was paid to fabricate all of these speeches and that she was just an actress. She never really believed in any of this, that her conversion to Christianity was fake. Hi, Miss Bluebird. And hey, Nate. And they basically made this film in order to puncture ostensibly they made it to puncture the credibility of the pro-life movement, of anyone who criticized Roe v. Wade. And when you look at it, when you look at how it was done, it just reveals the ghoulishness of the infanticide supporters, the people who support legalized abortion. When you look at the depths they sunk to in order to attempt to damage the credibility of of preserving life. Basically, they took a woman who was, at best, her faculties were damaged. I don't know if you've any of you have been there with people who are on their deathbed or are dying, and they're usually not they're not the most cogent. They're not at their most cogent or coherent, and they're extremely vulnerable. Depending on where they are, they might be looked after by people who don't really care about their health. So what this guy did was basically take a film crew and insert himself into this woman's life after she had been provided for and cared for by caring Christians at her most vulnerable point in life, and they manipulated her into serving their agenda, which is basically to keep abortion up to birth legalized throughout the United States in perpetuity, and to prevent the erosion of any sort of access to abortion by the Supreme Court or by state legislatures or by any lawful authority. It's basically a propaganda piece designed to portray the pro-life movement as heartless and duplicitous. And the irony here is that the entire basis of Roe v. Wade is pure dissimulation and deception. And the only reason we have institutionalized abortion on demand in the United States, and have had it since 1973, is because a group of lawyers lied in order to get this case to the Supreme Court. The petitioner, Norma McCorvey, never actually had an abortion. The entire backstory that led to this case being litigated before the Supreme Court was a complete fabrication. And similarly, in the companion case, Doe versus Bolton, was also it was also just a complete lie from the beginning to end. This woman never actually had procured an abortion. By the time the case was decided, she'd already given birth. Yeah, they don't care about the mothers. They don't care about anything. This is the perfect illustration of that. The fact that they use this woman who was in this vulnerable state in order to produce this propaganda flick, which has been already been incredibly successful in the sense of molding the media narrative. The fact that the press is harping on this, the fact is harping on this non-story and broadcasting it in almost every, if you do a Google news alert for abortion or for Roe or Norma McCorvey, you'll see hundreds of stories just trumpeting this piece of political agitprop. It's not an actual documentary uh, in the sense of being a realistic or objective retelling of history. It's a complete fabrication, just like the original Roe case. And if you go to the director's website, it's so incredibly obvious where his motivations lie. You look at some of the other quote unquote documentaries that he's produced, and it's about transhumanism. And every other documentary, as far as I can tell, the other five that were listed are all have something to do with promoting transgenderism, promoting the genital mutilation of young children in order to in order to in order to convey uh, the necessity of having a transgender movement of 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 telling young children that they were born into the wrong sex, kind of brainwashing them, forcing them to take puberty blockers. It's really obscene. If you look at the all of the other documentaries that this and one of the one of the people who met Norma McCorvey and developed a friendship with her, a Christian, um, one of the Christians who met her while she was working in the abortion industry, actually talked about this or alluded to it in an interview with Dr. Michael Brown. The fact that if you look at his the documentaries that he's produced, it's obvious where he's coming from. This is someone who promotes transgenderism, who promotes abortion, who promotes a vilification of Christ, and is resolutely anti-Christian. So of course he wants to delegitimize Norma McCorvey's conversion, and he wants to portray her uh, as an actress and someone who was manipulated by the pro-life movement and by Christians in order to attack women's rights, quote unquote, i.e., the right to terminate your pregnancy and to kill your child. Um, Thanks, Scott. Uh, and it's just so apparent to anyone with any sort of rationality. But of course, the the media narrative, it feeds into a pre-existing ideology. People who already support the idea of being able to kill your unborn child and having that enshrined in the Constitution, it just reinforces their pre-existing philosophy. So they don't actually care that the entire underlying premise of Roe v. Wade was fallacious, that all of the circumstances they put forward were completely false. Just like they don't care that the mythology of back alley abortions is just that the tens of thousands of women being killed by illegal abortions, that's a complete myth, and which never occurred. It's all of these lies are justified in order to in order to continue the legalized sacrifice of children in this country. And that's the irony here. You have the press and the media condemning Christians and the pro-life movement as using deception, when the only way abortion is able to take place legally is through the use of deception. They have to continually lie. This is why when you see abortion clinics, they're never labeled abortion clinics. They always have some sort of anodyne euphemism to mask the reality of what's occurring inside of their walls. So you have, women's life center, or women's um, women's pregnancy alternative options, or or just any one of a number of just completely Orwellian phrases that disguise what's actually occurring. And it's why they have to use these myths, like the idea that abortion is being used as a last ditch option for women, whether rather than as a form of preferred birth control. Family care centers. That's probably what I was thinking of. But yeah, you have all of these euphemisms used to disguise the horror of what's going on. And you see this throughout the abortion industry. Even the main advocates for abortion and their political action committees and their lobbies, they mask what they support. So instead of the National Abortion Rights Action League, you have to soft pedal the abortion, so it's NARAL, pro-choice America. Uh, you can't say you can't even use the word abortion in the name, because it's such a repellent concept to anyone with any sort of stirring of a conscience. And this is why Planned Parenthood continually tries to deceive the public about what they're doing. They keep saying that abortion is just a fraction of their industry, that it's only 3%. So instead of counting, so they count someone who talked with a person who worked at Planned Parenthood. They count that as being a consultation, in the same way that an abortion is. So they can minimize the gravity of what they're doing. And even though they admitted in court under oath that they sell fetal tissue and they sell baby parts for profit. Even though they admitted that in court, you don't see that in the press being reported. You never hear them admit that they're actually profiting from the dismemberment of human beings in utero. Just like you don't hear about the fact that Joseph Mengele, one of the most notorious Nazi war criminals who was able to escape Germany through one of the rat lines, when he escaped and he came to South America, what was his profession? He wasn't a real doctor. Like abortion doctors are not real doctors. They're really butchers. What did he do when he escaped to South America? Well, some Nazi officials started working for the Egyptian military. Others started trying to find ways to get back at the Jews by attacking Israel. But there were others who went to South America, and his job when he in exile or in hiding was to perform abortions. And it makes sense when you think of what Joseph Mengele in did during the Holocaust. His job was to perform medical experiments and murder young Jewish children, and experiment on Jewish women who were pregnant. So he just took the skills that he learned as a Nazi doctor in Germany and applied them to his new situation in South America. And yet you'll never hear any of this. The whole idea is that abortion, the horrific nature of abortion and the barbarity of abortion has to be disguised and soft pedaled and obscured in order to make it palatable to the general public, in order to mask what it is, which is basically premeditated murder. And there was an interesting podcast. There's a channel called When We Understand the Text, which has short little YouTube clips explaining the gospel and the Bible and exegeting the Bible. And it's by a pastor. It's run by a pastor, Gabriel Hughes, in Kansas. And he had an interesting podcast the other day where he discussed this and discussed this in the context of people, Christians who apostatized, who gave up their faith or left their faith, and he was trying to explain the whole idea of basically perseverance of the saints. And he he was looking at certain chapters in the gospel where it's explained how and also the Pauline epistles. Paul describes this, how people left the church and how if they leave, it's an evidence that or a sign that they weren't really part of the church. And he was trying to apply this to the Norma McCorvey case. And I disagree partially. I'm not saying that it couldn't be accurate. We don't know the mind or the heart of Norma McCorvey, what she was thinking on her deathbed. But I would disagree in the sense that I don't think we should take what the pro-abortion movement, which is built on lies, and even in this case, we can see how their sole intent is just to deceive people. I don't think we should take what they present at face value. Now, I'm not saying that he could possibly be right. We don't know what Norma McCorvey, what her relationship was with Christ when she died, but I don't think we should take the presentation of these people at face value, that she repudiated Christ and that she condemned the pro-life movement. I think we should look at it more as the depths that these people will go to in order to manipulate public opinion and deceive the public about what is essentially infanticide, or child killing, child sacrifice. But on in a broader sense, I think this pastor does have a point in that it is irrelevant whether or not Norma McCorvey, whether or not what they present is an accurate reflection, which again I don't think it is. But even if it is, I don't. It's really irrelevant to whether or not to the morality of abortion. You can, this is. Well, let me give you an analogy. There was the case of Elie Wiesel, who was accused of sexual harassment or assaulting women later on in his life, and using the logic of the supporters of abortion and the people promoting this hot hack job of a film, you could use that to say, well, this justifies the Holocaust. Well, Elie Wiesel, because he was such he was so central to presenting the horrors of the Holocaust to a Western audience, and the fact that he turned out to be sexually immoral, or he had this very big character flaw, that delegitimizes all of his work. Therefore, exterminating 6 million Jews is correct. That's the sort of twisted logic that you would employ if you follow the chain of reasoning used by the people supporting this documentary and the people who are part of the quote unquote pro-choice movement, you would have to use that same philosophy. Say, well, this guy was um, obviously had very flawed character. Therefore, the Holocaust was justified. And 99% of the people, almost every sane person would say that's ridiculous. That's completely insane. But if you were a supporter of abortion, you'd say, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. So the fact that Norma McCorvey was, according to them, was an actress and was lying. Therefore, that makes infanticide and killing your children right. And again, for a normal, rational person, they would see the fallacy of this sort of logic. It doesn't make any sense. And there's a great verse in the Bible that illustrates this. Let God be true and every man a liar. In Paul's epistle to the Romans. Now, the context of that is he's writing to Gentile believers in the Church of Rome, and he's discussing the Jews collectively rejecting Christ. Not all Jews, of course, because the church at that point was still mostly Jewish. But the, a broader application of this would be, it doesn't matter if someone apostatizes or leaves the church. That doesn't mean Christ does not exist, or that Christ doesn't rule. And just like if someone who purported to be a member of the pro-life movement repudiates those beliefs, that doesn't mean that killing babies is the morally correct or ethical thing to do. It's just really tortured reasoning. And I think a lot of the people on the left, if they actually studied logic, they would understand the fallacious nature of this argument. But again, those are just some of my thoughts on the Norma McCorvey doc. And thanks everyone for coming. John, Miss Bluebird, Nate, if he's still here. And I will talk to you later.